Good morning. Good morning. Another wonderful morning here in Pretoria, and good to see you all. It's great to have you here. And it's my name is David Bouwer, and I am here together with my co-hosts Mona Ruetz, now Bouwer, Glenn Lees-Jones, Wilhelm Lombard, and of course our famous Russell von Freyken. Sorry.
Where did you come with that? The famous.
You know, today is actually a famous day. Mona, Mona, you're not muted. So today is a famous day. I don't know if you know, but Bafana is going to be playing Mexico this evening, and on the Soccer World Cup. So I hope you're all going to be watching that. It's going to be something really, really fantastic. But today's actually, we're going to talk a little bit about something else, which is really important. And it's something I've been doing since 1987. And that's tender management. And not recently, I've changed this through to what we call bid architecture. And there's a total difference between what bid architecture is to tender management. So this is something we're going to be discussing today. But before we do that, let me just go around the room and ask each of our co-hosts to introduce themselves. Let's start with Mona. Mona, over to you.
Yes, I'm the owner of Inscorp Insurance Brokers. And what I do is I provide you a safety net for when it happens what you thought will not or never happens. Just had a recent fire where the owner thought my stuff will never burn. Guess what? Total loss. So that's what I do, is I take care of your assets.
Thank you, Mona. Let's go to Glenn. Glenn, over to you.
Thanks, David. Good morning, co-hosts, and to all the listeners and everyone watching. Glenn Lees-Jones. I'm a life and business coach. I also do counseling and mentoring, but I like to call myself your personal locksmith, simply because every single one of us has incredible, amazing potential inside us. And I help unlock that potential. I help you step into destiny. And that's me. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Glenn. Great to have you here. Let's go to Russell. Russell, over to you.
Morning, David. Morning, co-hosts. Oops. Sorry, that's my wife's phone that just went off. Your phone. Yeah, sorry, it's Russell. Thank you, David. Thank you, co-hosts, and welcome to the listeners. Today I'm going to not be focused on the sales side of what OrbSpec does, but I'm actually going to listen from a different perspective. I'm also on the board of directors of an organization called CTAP, Community Transformation Accelerator Program. And I've got a lot to do with maybe not tenders, but proposals to government level and a lot of funding opportunities through corporates and so forth. So yes, it might not be tenders, but I think there's similarities, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you. Wilhelm, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Wilhelm Lombard. I run the Growth Percolator. We help CEOs see whether their culture and leadership systems are actually ready for growth and fix the pressure points before you scale. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to all of you. And the reason to have a whole lot of co-hosts here is so that they can ask me questions and ask the guests that we have different questions from their perspectives. So I'm looking forward to some good questions from you as co-hosts, but also from you as the audience. So if there are questions that you have, please put them into the comments and we'll answer them when I'm done with my little presentation. So let's start. And, as I said to you, bid architecture is a term that I've actually come up with. And the reason why I've come up with it is what I'm going to talk about today. And, I've been doing this since 1987, as I said originally. And I started off at Marion Roberts. I started off at Marion Roberts in the tendering department. I was very fortunate. I had a good mentor at the time. Kennedy, his name was. And we went through and we actually put a whole tender together for the Sasol Pension Fund officers. And what actually happened, which was fantastic for me and a very good learning curve, was that I assisted with the whole tender process. I did it. And once we awarded that tender, which was my first tender that I won in many, the management said, okay, David, now that you've won the tender, you got to go and manage it. So now I had to go along and implement what I had actually tendered for. And obviously now I had to make sure that we're going to make a profit at the end of the day and do what we said we're going to do in the tender. So it was a great learning curve for me. And I think that's the essence of what, when you tender, you must make sure that you actually can deliver. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. So the thing that I've found in all the tenders that I've done and all the bids that I've been participated with, which is over 35 years worth, is that many businesses only discover once they've actually submitted the bid and they've lost, why they lost. And this is the difference between tender management and bid architecture. Tender management is important because it keeps the bid organized, it manages the documents, the deadlines, the contributors, the compliance requirements, the final submission. And without that, basically a tender bid would be worthless. However, bid architecture asks a deeper question. Have we designed the bid in a way that makes the buyer's decision easier, safer, and more dependable? In other words, have we given the evaluator a clear reason to trust us, score us, and recommend us? This is my central message today, that tender management gets the bid submitted, but the bid architecture makes it worth selecting. So let's go and see how this actually works and how it matters. So the tender world, as you all know, those of you are in the tender process and doing tenders, etc., it has changed significantly. There are far more people actually putting tenders together and submitting tenders. The terms and conditions within the tenders are far more complex. There are more governance requirements and expectations. And one of the big things that happens is that most tenders are given like a month or a few weeks just to respond to a very complex tender. So you've got to have all your facts up front and know where you're going. So in a lot of companies that do a lot of tenders, they have what they call a bid team. But some of these bid teams are not full-time bid teams. In other words, they are the financial director, the sales team, the operations team, the technical experts, the executives, who have other jobs to do. And then suddenly this tender comes on, the board of directors or the CEO says, okay, we've got to submit a tender for this to grow our business. And they give it to them, and they've got other jobs to do. So suddenly they're under huge pressure. They've got to do this complex tender, submit it, and it causes a bit of mayhem within the company. Now, one could say, hey, wow, there's AI, and AI helps with us to submit the bid. And this is something that's actually come up. Now, one of the things that I learned about AI, garbage in, garbage out. And don't forget, your competition are also using AI. So all it's doing really is, if you've got a weak strategy in the beginning, all it's going to make is it's going to polish it and make it sound more generic. And this is the danger of using AI. So now remember that the people who have submitted the tender and they're looking for the submissions, they're looking for confidence. They want to build confidence. They don't looking just for a document that is submitted that's compliant. They want to understand the solution. They want to trust the bidder. They want to see the evidence and defend the award so they can actually defend it when they actually award that tender, ensuring that the person can deliver what they promised. So this is where bid architecture becomes critical. It moves the tender from a document assembly to a design decision to win the tender itself. So the question I have is, are we actually just merely completing a document? And is it enough to be trusted? So let's see exactly where this takes us. So let's have a look at the difference between what tender management is and bid architecture in my mind is. Both are critical to the process. However, The tender management is the operational layer as I see it. It coordinates the deadlines, the document requests, the contributor inputs, the compliance, the signatures, the formatting, the submission requirements, and basically it asks, have we submitted what they have asked for? However, bid architecture is the strategic layer that I see. It designs the win themes, the proof structure, the response logic, the evaluator journey. And the question that is there is, have we made it easier for them to choose us? Now, this is something that I do with all my tenders. I make sure that it's easy for the evaluator to actually say, yes, this is the person that we must award it to. So tender management is about the control. Bid architect is about the persuasion. Tender management protects the submission. Bid architecture strengthens the decision for the award to be given to the individual or that company. The mistake many companies make is believing that a well-managed tender is automatically a competitive tender. This is not the case. A tender can be beautifully coordinated, can be beautifully submitted, but if it fails to give the evaluator a compelling reason to award the work, well, then we've lost the tender itself in the first place. So tender management gets the bid submitted. Bid architecture designs the reason for it to be selected. The need for the strategic layer is increasingly because several trends are changing and how bids are prepared and evaluated. Now, I've been on both sides. I've actually prepared tenders, and I've also prepared the RFPs, and I've also done the evaluation of those. So I've been on all aspects of this. Let's go to the next slide. So there are 6 trends that are shaping how bids are written right now. And this increases the need for strategy, evidence, and clarity. The first is AI. Now, AI helps you to very quickly put together a draft. It summarizes work. It reworks the content. But remember, if your inputs are generic, the outputs will also be generic. Again, garbage in, garbage out. AI accelerates that. But what it does is if your bid is weak, it's going to show that weakness even stronger than it did without that AI being used. Second is centralized content libraries. Now, there's so much information out there. You can even use AI to now research and get information that you may need for your bid. The question is that, are you just using what you think that's out there, or are you doing the actual research to find out that it's actual factual? And this is something that's really very, very important, because you might be relying on information that you think is correct and it's actually not. So that is another issue that one needs to look at. The other thing is the faster turnaround times. Clients are asking for bids to be submitted within very, very short time, which means that the client who's submitting the tender needs to have all his facts, all his buying information, all the pricing, all that information available in a very, very short time, and it must be correct. No use in actually submitting a tender that's going to be incorrectly priced. The next thing is obviously the subject matter. Because of the short timings and because of the very detailed information that some of these tenders actually require. One of my friends is actually doing a tender right now for government, and they're asking for incredible different specs for the equipment that has to be submitted. And this is causing huge delays for him because he's actually having to get this information from his suppliers, and it's not forthcoming. So the question is, do you have the information available from the experts where the expertise is needed within the tender itself? Another issue which is really now important, and it's coming up more and more, is compliance, governance, and auditability. These are really important, especially in the public sector and where there are regulated opportunities. And the last is obviously environmental, social, governance impact. What are you submitting? Is it actually correct from a social point of view, a government's point of view, an environmental point of view, localization, and obviously in South Africa with BE, These are things that one has to look at and has to have to design for and strategically design for before you actually submit your bid. So the question that I've got for you is, AI can help you to write it faster, but bid architecture will decide whether it's worth writing. And that's something that one should look at. So one of the biggest challenges in this environment is that there are too many bids that sound the same, especially if you're using AI. Let's go to the next slide. So the first challenge that we must look at is that most of the bids sound the same. Now, this is something that one needs to look at. We have the experience, we understand the requirements, we have the team, we are committed to quality, we offer value. Now, those are terms that we all would like to use in our tender submissions. The problem with this, it's not that they are false. The problem is that they are expected. The bidder, the evaluators expect you to actually be able to deliver. So what they really want is they want to see is that, can you actually deliver in the way that and show that you can deliver. So what the question should be asked is, which experience removes the buyer's risk? So we need to prove that we are under pressure, that the priorities and the decisions are there for the buyer or the person that submitted the bid, and we need to address those in the correct way. And we need to actually show that we can, that we have the experience. We have to show that we understand the requirements. We have to show that we can offer the quality. We need to show that we have the right team. We have to show that we're committed. It's no use just saying those words. So a claim tells the buyer what you believe. Proof shows the buyer why they can believe it. And I think this is the most important part of any bid. The second major challenge is where teams believe compliance alone can win. I've seen this many times, where a lot of the time is actually putting together all the various documents that are needed for the bid. Now, this can actually take up a huge amount of time in the compilation of any bid. But companies that have that information available and on file are going to do much better, because it's not where they need to put the focus. The focus needs to be in the detail. So compliance is essential. If the tenderer asks for documents, forms, certificates, price schedules, method statements, deliberations, these need to be included. And if they're not, sometimes your bids can be thrown out straight without them even going to the next step. But one must remember, compliance does not automatically create preference. A compliant bid can still be weak. It can be unclear. It can be generic. It can be difficult to read. It can be difficult to score. That is why I separate the review into two parts. The first part is compliance review. We need to answer everything and include every requirement. The second is the scoring review. The scoring review is actually the most important, because you're expected, as I said earlier, to comply. So the scoring is where we actually have to go along and say, have we made it easier for the evaluator to award us points? And the thing is that it's points on every single part of the submission. So that's where the most important question, the most important issue is. The answer to the question, but you need to persuade, you need to show evidence, and you need to align to that scoring logic. A lot of tenderers put out the scoring. You need to ensure that you have basically scored yourself at the end before you actually submit the bid, and see where you are. So compliance gets you into the room. Confidence helps you to win the room. And that's what the most important thing is. The next challenge is timing. Many bids are weakened before their writing even begins. Let's have a look at that. So I have a methodology that I put together for when I go along and see a client. The first is the 24-hour launch. Now, what happens is, what I do there is I go along and I identify, do we want to do this bid in the first place? Can we actually deliver on what we are saying? This is the thing. Can we deliver on this bid? And there are a lot of bids that actually maybe we don't want. as a client. So let's go through this. I was on a tender once where it was a huge tender. It was down in Cape Town. And what happened was there was a late submission. There was a mess up, and guess what? We never delivered the bid. The bid we actually were late, and they didn't actually accept the bid. So all the work that we did basically disappeared. So the question is, don't wait until the last minute to actually put the bid together. Once you receive the actual tender submission or the tender documentation, the RFP, you basically start to actually look at it and put a strategy together. You need to put a win theme together. You need to put a proof map together. You need to put an owner matrix together. You need to actually start writing against each section and scoring yourself against each section. You need to actually review and get someone else to review it as well. Don't just rely on your own information that you put in. Get someone else within your company to actually review the information. Is this correct? Can we deliver on this? So a proper launch should happen within the first 24 hours. So that's the big thing that I always say. And in that session, you need to decide whether you want to bid, are there any red flags? Can you actually deliver on all the criteria? What is your win theme? What is your proof map? And then to start allocating responsibilities straight away. So the first 24 hours is really, really critical in actually submitting a winning bid. So even when a bid is well organized, it still needs one thing above anything else, and that's evidence. Let's go to the next slide. So weak evidence loses confidence. And this is something. So a lot of people can claim information, claim that you can do it. But they don't give the evaluator enough proof to trust those claims. The proof change is simple. Claim, evidence, example, outcome, buyer relevance. If you claim that you can mobilize quickly, prove it. Where have you done this before? What is the time frame? What are the outcomes? Why does this matter to the buyer? If you claim to reduce the risk and you show the mechanism that you actually can do this, then what will happen is that the evaluator or the adjudicator would say, yes, I can actually support this. I can actually, when I make the decision to award this tender to this company, I can actually defend it. And that's what the most important thing is. So remember, claim, evidence, example, outcome, buyer relevance. This is what's the most important thing. So one of the things that obviously another issue that we need to look at is AI. Now, AI can be used for a number of things. AI can be used to summarize the RFP. It can create the first draft structures. It can put together compliance matrices. It can do content search, and it can rewrite for clarity. It can check your spelling, it can check your grammar, all those things. But the question is, we need humans, and the humans need to keep the whole process as far as the buyer context is concerned, the decision logic, the win themes, the risk removal, and the proof selection. So bid architecture helps you decide what should be written, why it matters, and how it should be positioned. AI will help you to put that together. So AI will accelerate the execution. It will make sure that you actually can deliver the document, but the strategy will direct the decision. So how do we put this all together? Let's have a look at the next slide. So in my mind, I have a number of layers of bid architecture. And these are from when you start all the way to the submission. The first layer is buyer intelligence. Who's the buyer? What do we really need? What are we afraid of? What pressure are they under? How will they defend the award? That's the first thing that we need to look at. The second one is bid and no bid discipline. So as I said before, not every tender is worth chasing. Sometimes the most strategic decision is not to bid. especially if the opportunity is poorly aligned, under-resourced, or unwinnable from your company's point of view. Don't go along and spend all that money that you have to do if you know that this is not something that you can actually do. The next one is a scoring strategy. You need to map out how you're going to evaluate your own submission. And you need to go along and analyze this for every single section within the tender itself. And some of these tenders are very thick. You need to actually do this for every single one. You have to have your own scoring strategy against the scoring that they have. Then you need to put together a win theme. This must be clear, it must be memorable, and you must have everybody who's actually submitting the bid must understand the reasons why they must first of all choose you and why you're actually putting this tender together and what the end result will be. They must actually be able to connect your capability to the buyer's decision, and this is so important. The fifth layer is the proof architecture. Every important claim must be supported by evidence, examples, and outcomes. If you can't achieve this, you are going to lose points. The last is obviously the narrative design. This is the structure, the flow, the messaging, the submission, the understandability of the actual tender itself. I normally, when I'm writing the tender, I always take it down to, say, grade 6 level so that it's totally understandable. Remember, the vigilators, the adjudicators have to read these documents, and they've got many documents to read. So if it becomes difficult and it's full of jargon and abbreviations, and they don't understand what's going on, they're also not going to be able to score you as well. And then the last one is actually submission control. Make sure you're going to be able to deliver the bid within the time period that they've given you. I normally plan that I have basically, if the time allows, a week in advance that I am actually complete the document, because there's always one or two things that one has to go back and change or upgrade or resubmit, not resubmit, but redo. So always allow yourself that time period at the end. So bid architecture is where the strategy, the evidence, instruction comes from, and where we actually ensure that compliance is met. The practical decision is, how do you start applying this in the next tender? Let's have a look at that. So what you've got to do is look at from yourself. There are basically 6 elements here. So this is a 24-hour launch playbook that you can play when you you're going to put any tender together. The first is, should we bid? And then identify why we can win. The second is, what will be scored and what will be weighed, and what can we actually deliver against that? The next, obviously, is a risk. What fears do we need to remove from the evaluator, the adjudicator? What fears may they have? And can we actually deliver the proof, the evidence of the claims that we make that we can deliver? And then the big thing is to identify the people who are actually going to be the stakeholders of this. Who's going to supply what by when? And obviously, right at the end, you do your own review. When do we test scoreability? These are 6 elements that if you can put these together, you're really on the right track to actually getting awarded the license. So tender management gets the bid delivered. Bid architecture gets the decision designed. So the future tender will be won by a company that helps the buyer score, trust, and defend their decision. If you would like to find out more, you're most welcome to get hold of me. There's my WhatsApp number, my email, my website, which we've just launched as a new website. Please go and have a look at that, support it. And then if you'd like to book a meeting with me, you can either do that through the website, or you can go to the Calendly. Just look for calendly.com, bid architect 30 minutes, and you'll get that. Or you can scan that to see me on LinkedIn. So I'd like to just thank you all, and I'm sure you have lots of questions. So thanks, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And yeah, back to you guys.
Now we don't know who's first.
Mana, you can go first.
Can I also start? from a buyer side, what happens behind the scenes once a tender is issued? That's one thing. And who is involved in evaluating the submissions, and how do they decide which supplier is credible, compliant, and worth appointing?
Right. So it would depend on who actually submitted the bid. Now, I know, like, for example, AXA, a bid that we recently did for them, where, or not for them, but for the company that was submitting to AXA. AXA actually appoints a separate company to actually go along and invigilate those bids. So they don't do it themselves. They just basically manage the process. They then hand it to another company who obviously has the scoring that was actually put out in the actual tender document themselves, and then they will do the actual scoring. They'll put together a recommendation, and then that will be taken back to AXA. In the past, when I've done this process, when I've invigilated, I actually gave out the tender. I wrote the tender itself for the tenderers to submit. I then got it back, and I had to invigilate. And then basically what I did then was I then went back to the client, and I said, right, these are the various submissions we've got. These people didn't comply from the compliance point of view. These are the people that actually did comply, and obviously we scored them. And then these are the scoring, and these are the recommendations. Then they go through them themselves, and then they would actually award whoever they think is necessary. So sometimes consultants are used, sometimes in-house people are used to decide who should be awarded the tender. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I'm starting to think it's an avenue I have not really used before, which I'm thinking of too. But there was one that we tendered on, and David helped me with that. But I was like, and I think we didn't get it because I didn't listen to him. But I was frustrated in the sense, like, it to me it felt like we're repeating a lot of stuff, and I just wanted to say one thing once, and then then we didn't get it because I didn't do what you told me to do. Why would you repeat certain things a lot of times in your tender document? Because it didn't make sense to me at the time. So maybe you can explain it to somebody else who also wonders about this.
So, all right. So what happens generally is that there will be different experts within the organization that need to vigilate the tender. So, for example, you would have the financial person, the operations person, the maybe another expert in the field. And the tender then is divided up into those various people, and they'll say, okay, you're going to look at the financial section, you're going to look at this section. And because of time and because of the number of tenders, you know that sometimes, I mean, there are lots of tenders that are submitted. They will then go along and they will just read their sections. So that is why a lot of information is repeated within different sections, is because you have different invigilators reviewing different sections. It's not one person who reads the whole tender. They will actually divide it up and say, okay, you're going to look, you analyze that part, score it, you analyze that part. And if they don't have a full picture of what you've actually submitted, you're actually going to lose the thread. So that's why it's so important to, you know, there will be repeats. And also another thing that also happens is sometimes people, when they read, they don't see what you just said. So you need to repeat it to get it back into their noggin. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I also think there's a lot of adrenaline going at the end of the tender when you actually go and submit your tender. I was fortunate enough to go with David on one of these tenders and at the airport. And they came out with a little, because this is all new to me, and they're all standing in a line there. They kind of wait until the last moment to throw it in because there's that thrill about it. That they made it on time, and they come out with a laptop, and there's a clock ticking, 1 minute, seconds down, and all the vibe in there was actually amazing. How does it feel when you get to that end and you had done all that work and finally you're there and you throw it into the bin?
Relief. Relief. Like, phew, I've done it. I submitted it on time. Yeah, I've been to a few of these ones. The one I mentioned earlier, where the guys didn't submit. You know, well, they did submit, but it was late. It was like 15 minutes late, and it was a mayhem of a day. I remember it was early morning. We had to submit by like, I think it was 10 o'clock. It was raining in Cape Town. It was a horrific day. And the traffic jams and what have you, racing through the traffic, and then the bid fell apart. Everything went wrong. It was months and months of work that just went down the drain.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I saw a couple of people running around the corner, and I think there were two guys that were too late. But the speed they came in there, and they like slid past and then come back, and this one guy was like, sorry, it's closed. So if they said 12, it's 12, then they just close it, and you can't put it in. So that was quite something to experience.
Yeah, that was fun. Shameful person.
David,
Right.
I can sort of relate with that. That's why when I hear the word tendering, I want to run away in a sense, because many years ago I was an account manager with an IT company. We supply IT personnel to different companies and so on. And I also needed to do a tender, and it was my first time. It was for SAPs, and I did start well before the time, and you can't start too early. You're always a bit late in any case. But okay, so it was this pressure, and I put the things together, and you copy CVs and all those things. Yes, it was a job and a half. And then just before the time, some of the experts come in there and they say, no, we need to change this. And we start over. And that put us in a place where there was just not enough time. And as you mentioned, racing down the highway, almost killing us with this tender document. And when I ran in there at the SAP's office, it was 5 minutes late, and they just said sorry. So I don't like it. But what I like about your presentation was the difference that I see between just doing a tender and being a bid architect. And I like the thing of that decision logic, the heart that you need to put into it. I see the difference there. There's some heart to be put in to understand the other person, the one that read the document. You must have another feel for that. It's not just presenting some document. And I like the art thing. It's something that you design. It's the architect. Now you design a house. You design something that people would look at and would like, because that is what they want. So I like that type of energy that you actually portray in your presentation. And yes, you mentioned a couple of times, you talk about the AI part, and AI is wonderful, but there's no human factor involved in that. And that's important. We're still humans. Humans on the other side will still read that tender document, and it's so important. The biggest challenge that I see with all these things is it's a team effort now. There's lots of people to be involved, and they are not always as motivated as you are that build this document or this tender. They must supply some information. How do you overcome that? How do you motivate the rest of the team players to get seriously involved? Because it's actually an extra. They don't want to do it. They got their jobs. Now they must come up with all these other things. I think that's a big challenge. How do you overcome that?
Well, I'm actually going to tell you a story. During the last Soccer World Cup that we had in South Africa, I was actually putting together a tender. And so what I did was I went to all the different departments and I said, okay, which team are you supporting? And, one would say Mexico, Brazil, England, whatever. So then what I did is I made a chart and I put their team and I got their name, their team name and everything. I put on a chart together. And then obviously I had listed out a whole lot of requirements and deadlines that they had to submit certain information on. So I created this like Excel spreadsheet. On the one side was their names, and then each of the columns was basically a deliverable that they had to deliver, right? So I would give them a score, and I would say, okay, when you've delivered it, you get a score, like 1 point or 1 goal or whatever. And then what would happen is that every week I would go and actually put this up on the board outside, a big like A3 thing, and put up the scores of the different departments as far as their scoring was concerned, how many goals they've done. And I tell you what, this was absolutely so motivational, because different departments wanted to beat the other departments. So they were actually not worried about the information. They were worried about getting the score, scoring the goals. And it was a fantastic motivator. So, and also the other thing is, obviously, when you coordinate something like this and you put a bid together, one needs to actually ensure that everyone's aligned and make it exciting. Don't put the stress on people, because it could be very stressful. Because, when I was doing this with this specific tender, I was dealing with a whole lot of departments. They all had their own work to do, and this was extra work above the work that they normally had to do to actually submit the tender. But we did it, and well, obviously we won the tender, but it was a great motivation. So there we are. Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Let's go to Glenn. Glenn.
Thanks, David. Very, very interesting. I've actually been involved with one of your tenders, and I must admit it was a very interesting time. Quite stressful as well, I must admit. But I actually just looked up the word architecture, and it's very interesting for me. If you actually look at the word architecture, it says it's the art and science of design a building structure and the process of translating abstract human needs into tangible environments, which is very interesting in terms of the bid architecture. It really fits so in line with what you're doing, and I thought that was really wonderful. My first question is maybe a bit of a silly question, but it seems almost like in terms of the submissions, you have to submit on a particular day. I can't submit like a week before the time. Is that true or not?
Yeah, generally, obviously, people like to have their privacy, and they don't want to have their information seen before. That information could leak out to their competition. You never know, what's happening. So what happens is generally the people who are tendering will submit basically just before, an hour before or what have you, and a lot of the proper, like, for example, the AXA, they've got a proper process where it goes into a sealed container. There's a hole in the wall. It's like a post box, big post box. And the challenge with AXA was the fact that the size of the actual opening restricted the size of the document you had to put in. So if you came with a box, you couldn't put it in.
You put it in.
Obviously, that was a control mechanism from their side. But to answer your question, is people, generally want to ensure that their information is not privy to maybe a competitor or anyone, and you don't know what actually happens behind the scenes if you submit the tender beforehand. And then a lot of what they do is when, like a lot of government tenders, what they do there is that they would have they open the tender slot box or the box for receiving the tenders at a certain period of time. And maybe they're receiving lots of other tenders. So you don't want to get your tender mixed up in a tender that was submitted, it needed to be submitted 2 or 3 days beforehand. So that's why they have this. So it's all more controlled from their point of view as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Absolutely. Great. All right, next question is again a pretty straightforward thing, but I want to ensure that the listeners also understand this, because I think maybe some people don't quite get it. If I'm a company, I want to actually tender for a particular project, or I want to get people to tender for a particular project. Sorry, I have this project going. I want to get people to tender. And you basically act as the middleman between the companies that are tendering and the company that's actually doing the project. Not so. So I'm the company, I will make contact with you and I'll say to you, no, so I'm actually wrong. Yeah. This is the reason why I wanted to actually get it right. So you actually act as the middleman between a company that wants to tender. There's a company.
Yes.
Okay, let me start off with this.
So
I'm a company that has a project.
Yeah.
Wilhelm and Russell and Mana want to tender. You act as the middleman, and you can actually do the tender for one of them.
Correct. Yeah. So if say Mana wants to put the bid together, she can contact me and say, David, I want to win this bid, and then they get hold of me.
There we go. Got it. Okay, fantastic.
So that's what happens.
I think that's important. Just wanted to get clarity on that.
Thank you. Thanks. Any other questions, Glenn? Is that all right?
No,
I see we've got some questions from the audience. Thanks for those questions. Please put some more questions and we'll come back to you. Let's go to Russell. Russell, I know you've got some burning questions there. I can see.
I actually don't have burning questions. I actually have more comments and wanted to just do a discussion with you. So in my case with CTAP, so I've designed a co-funding model that I've taken to market where I have multiple funders funding for the same project to de-risk it and so forth. I've made a lot of notes. I've done a whole page full of notes and highlighted comments that you made as you went along. So my discussion with you is and it's a type of a question, is this that you were doing for tenders, I can actually also, I had a masterclass from you now, can utilize the thought process behind it in the funding requests that I send out. So, for example, 27th of this month, we have been invited to apply for funding from Jobs Fund, which is great for us. It's such a good. We've actually had very good interactions with government lately. But I can take this mindset of yours and I can actually just formulate it, because this looks like it's a winning recipe for you because you've been winning so many bids. It's just a matter of taking this and saying, okay, for what I'm busy doing is just formulating this into a proposal type of thing rather than the bid type of thing. Would you actually say, yes, Russell, that's something that you should do?
Definitely. This process can be used for pitching for extra funds as you're doing. You can use it's just a basic logic of how to actually approach the the question is, you want to give the evaluator that security that whatever decision he makes, he can actually defend it. Because generally what happens is that the person who actually makes the decision now sits and says, okay, I've now made a decision that this tender or this pitch is the one that we want to defend. And then when he goes along and he goes to his board and says, okay, guys, this is the guy that I'm recommending, he needs to defend it. So you're actually just giving him the ammo to defend it. So you definitely can use this in the process, especially that 24-hour playbook that I spoke about earlier.
Okay. Another thing that you said, which makes so much sense, and I wish, because I've done quite a few proposals already, and I wish I just had this content as a foundation, was where you said designing the decision. And it's changed everything for me all of a sudden. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, to design the decision in your proposal brings in that security for the guy that can actually back it up and say, this is the reason I'm choosing this, or I'm accepting this proposal. So that was a comment that was really good. And then the last thing that I liked, that I want to also just get a little bit more clarity from you, and you do know CTAP, you know what we're involved with. Evidence to bring confidence. So our proof of concept is not really our own. It's something that we were part of, and it never went much forward. I think you would know what I'm talking about through your discussions with COVID that came, and it was obviously done through Heineken and Touch Sites.
Correct.
So we don't really have a good proof of concept as such. We can say this, and the model that we have is so much more advanced than what that proof of concept was. That proof of concept was one intervention, where we've now got 7 interventions. We've now brought a 7th intervention recently, or 6th intervention. Anyway, how do we then structure evidence so that we can actually build the confidence when we don't really have a strong proof of concept? If possible, can you give me a heads up on that one?
The way I see it, and I know the story, is create the story. Create the story that people aspire to. Now, the Heineken story is a fantastic story. I mean, I from what I saw and what I read about it and what I was told about it, it's a fantastic story, and you should actually leverage that story, even though it might not be exactly the same. You're creating what is possible, and I think that's where you can really, get people excited about that and say, "This is, we've gone along, we've analyzed this, we've actually improved it. This is what we can do." And this is the evidence that it did work with even a lesser strategy that we've got now, and create this.
You've actually confirmed exactly what we were doing. We had a meeting with a very, very high level official. I can't mention his name, obviously, from the government last week, Thursday. I think you guys remember I told you that I have to leave early. And I actually did that in the conversation, was I used that as a foundation of what can happen, and proof that with the extra interventions we bring in, that can be a greater outcome. And it was actually accepted very well. So you've actually confirmed what I'm doing is the correct way, is to create that good story. David, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. And no more questions.
No, thank you. Let's just go to the audience. I see that a few people have made some remarks. Eugene, thank you. Yeah, I'd really a stressful topic. Yeah, absolutely. But if you know what you're doing, it's exciting. So and if you've got the confidence, it's there. And this is what I have, and I've been doing this since '87. So I've done a lot of these tenders, and I've been through all kinds of things that's happened. But anyway, great. Thanks for the comment. Appreciate. Then Rodney, thanks Rodney for that. How much time is given to verify claims made in bids to ensure validity? a lot of that. I would say a lot of time is given to that, Rodney. I know what you're doing. I know that you in the tractor business, and that you are at the moment putting some tenders together. What you're going to put together for those tenders is going to be checked. So we need to ensure that whatever you put in there is correct. And you don't want egg on your face at the end of the day where you make claims and you can't, and the claims are incorrect. So I know you're waiting for that information from your suppliers. So wait for that information, make sure it's correct, and then use that information. Then see, Sue's also put a nice question there. Beyond tender management, what systems, relationships, proof of delivery, and competitive advantages must we build to create a business that consistently wins tenders year after year? So I think every business, every tender that you do will be different, unless it's basically a tender that is a repeat tender where the client's the same, the information required is the same. And that's what I found. When I was with Sun International and we were putting the tenders together for the actual casino licenses, every single casino license was different. The requirements are different, everything. So what you need to do is have the people, the experts, and the people that can actually do the delivery of the tender submission. That's what you need, because the information will change. So as far as just having a look, so I think having the right team together with you, having the right people who can actually do the delivery, and giving them the right information will ensure ongoing success. And so I see we've come to our end of our time period, and I'd really like to thank those questions. I hope I've answered that question. And what I'll also do is, if there's any, and I see some people have asked if this is going to be available afterwards. Stephen, yes, you can go back and relook at this on YouTube, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. And there will also be a newsletter that will be coming out. I'd like to just go around the room and get takeaways. So I'm going to start with Mona. Mona, what's your big takeaway from today's discussion?
I think preparation, and you need to put all the dots and the T's and cross the T's. I think also what is important is if this is awarded to you, will you actually be able to deliver? I think that's one important thing that we never think about. It looks like this big dream. If I get this contract, it's going to be X, Y, Z. But there's so many things that you need to consider before you even enter to the tender stage. Because reputation is important. If you can't deliver, you're gone.
Absolutely. And, we've been through this whole process of where people have been awarded the contract because of various things. But nowadays it's being more critical on actually, putting together a proper tender that you actually can substantiate and deliver on. Let's go to Wilhelm. Wilhelm, what's your takeaway?
Well, there's actually two things. Methodology. There must be a method and a way to do things. There's a definite way. And design the decision. I love that one. Design the decision. I think it's so important in everything that we do. Thank you very much. That was an excellent session. Thank you.
Thanks, Wilhelm. Let's go to Glenn. Glenn?
Thanks, David. I tend to agree with what Mona spoke about, just communication. Man, that's important. You need to be asking the right question, gathering the information. The more information you can get, the better it's going to be at the end of the day. And that information needs to be correct. So, yeah.
Thank you, Glenn.
Great. And I can certainly recommend you for other people to do tenders, definitely. The amount of effort and work that you put into it fascinated me.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. Russell?
I have to stick with designing a decision. It's just changed the whole way that I'm looking at the way I do my proposals and so on. Every time I've been doing the proposals, I've been doing them to justify and clarify what we're doing. But I like the idea of actually doing a proposal and designing that proposal for them to make a better decision. So you've given me a lot of work and a lot of grey brain matter I need to now utilize somewhere along the line to figure out how I do that in my proposals. But that's my takeaway. I love it. And I think it's something that's really valuable in any business dealing, actually. I'm looking at this now from my sales point of view, and that's what sales does. When you sell correctly, you are guiding your buyer to buy from you. And it's actually as clear as that. You've just put it in such beautiful terms. So, yeah, thanks for that. That's my takeaway.
Pleasure. Thanks, Russell. Well, thanks, guys, for being here. We'll be here next week again. We've got some exciting guest speakers coming in and going to be talking all about different things that will increase your wisdom and your knowledge in how to deal with life and how to deal with in business. So thanks so much for being here. Really great. And thanks for the opportunity to present. And what I'd like to also just say, please follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. Let other people know about what we do. We're here to give back. We started this in 2023. We're here still. We are here every week, and we are growing every single day. So thank you, and appreciate all the audience and the listeners. And take care and have a fantastic week. And we'll see you next week. Wonderful. All right. I'm just going to ask the co-hosts just to stay on, and let's do this. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Welcome to Vision 2026. We give expertise a voice. A platform where bold ideas, lived expertise, and real experience shape how we grow, lead, and create impact in 2026 and beyond. Meet your host, David Bouwer, bid architect and strategic thinker, who helps leaders turn complexity into clarity and gives business leaders a voice that wins in the real world. Marna Rowitz, seasoned strategist and business leader, helping people protect what they've built and grow with clarity, resilience, and foresight. Glenn Leese-Jones, Map 4 Life coach with decades of experience guiding people and entrepreneurs to find purpose, set direction, and map their journey to meaningful success. Russell John Fagan, sales mastery trainer, who brings practical sales insight and transformational strategies that help individuals and businesses increase their influence and performance. Wilhelm Lombard, human systems and team performance coach focused on helping organizations strengthen team alignment, leadership energy, and human systems so people are ready for growth before growth exposes weaknesses. Together, we bring unique perspectives and deep expertise so you can think bigger, act bolder, and make 2026 your breakthrough year. Hit that subscribe button now and follow Vision 2026 for your weekly dose of expert insight, future-focused conversations, and real-world perspectives shaping South Africa. This is Vision 2026, giving expertise a voice.